Hello there, I am here to do the second half of my March reading. I'm aware this video is a bit late. There is pressing reasons for that. I'm not going to go into them here. If you're interested, I did write a blog post about what's been going on with me, which means that my filming has been intermittent and not the best recently. I will link that blog post down below if you're interested. So yeah, this video is late. However, I still wanted to do a second half of March wrap up because I read some really good books in March. Actually, the second half was probably the best half month of reading that I've had in a very long time, so I didn't want to let these books fall by the wayside. Now, the first book I read in this half of the month was The Collector by John Fowles. This is one of those books which has been on my shelf for so long. I've had this for about 5 or 6 years now, and it's never been really on my radar to read. It's a book that intrigued me enough that I wanted it, but yeah, it's never been at the top of my to be read list for some reason. However, I thought I would finally get to it because it's been there for a while, and I was so pleasantly surprised by this. I can't believe that it took me this long to read it. So this is about a man he's a strange person. He collects butterflies. He is one of those people who goes around preserving butterflies and sticking pins in them, etc. And he's always been quite sinister, and he ends up getting obsessed with this girl and he ends up kidnapping her, and we look at the experience that she has while kidnapped from his perspective, and also from a journal that she writes while she is in his possession, basically. And it gets very, very dark, and I love dark, so, you know, this was a win for me. The best way I can describe this is that it is a mix between Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov and The Dumb House by John Burnside. Both those books, if they came together and had a baby, it would be this book. It goes to places that you just don't think a writer would go to. It is so wonderfully fantastic. And I think what's also really good about this is that Lolita kind of makes you question who is in the wrong because of the way that the character portrays the events that are happening. This does exactly the same thing. So when we are in this man's head, what's happening is kind of not his fault. He kind of sees this girl as his friend. He thinks the relationship is quite positive. He thinks that she likes him, and he portrays himself as quite a nice captor. He doesn't seem to be treating her that badly, and you kind of start to think that what he's doing isn't so bad because he is just portraying it as being kind of nothing major, and like he's really nice to her. And then obviously when you see her sections and you see what's actually going on and you see it from her point of view, it's very worrying indeed, this thing that has been normalized to you for half of the novel. It's just so well written, and I think it's a really interesting look actually as well at first person. First person is something, I'm writing my novel in first person, and that's it's something that I'm not comfortable with. I don't tend to read first person, and I don't tend to write first person. I don't actually think I've ever written anything first person until this. However, when your novel comes to you, it comes to you in the form that it is, and I don't think I could write this story in anything but first person. Not an easy thing to write, especially if you're not used to it. And I think something really interesting actually in my Faber course is that our tutor said when you're writing first person, you have to think about the language that person would actually use. You know, it's not about being literary, it's not about writing well, it's about writing in the voice of that person. And I think this is a fantastic example of that, because this is not an educated man. He's lived a simple life. He doesn't know a lot of stuff, and that really comes across in his language that he uses and the way that his sentences run into each other and things like that. It's just so well written. Anyway, I'll stop going on about it, but I cannot recommend this book enough. Then I read Sight by Jessie Greengrass. Now, this is a book that I wanted to pick up, and it's been on my radar for a long time. However, I've heard pretty much exclusively negative things about it. People who have reviewed it have not been nice about it. So I've been kind of skeptical, and I thought that I wasn't going to enjoy it. However, it was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction last year, and generally I thought it sounded quite interesting. So this is about a woman who is already a mother, and she's just found out that she's pregnant again. And she's kind of ruminating on how she feels about motherhood, her relationship with her own mother, and I think it's strange to me that this book has had so much negativity around it, because books about motherhood are quite big at the moment, you know, predominantly Sheila Heti's motherhood, but this looks at kind of similar themes in a more fictional story setting. The only thing I would say about this that is a slight negative is that there are sort of sections in here which look at famous people throughout time who have kind of done studies into motherhood. So for instance, there's a section on Freud and his studies and his relationship with his mother and also with his children. There is a section on somebody who I can't remember, a biopsy on a pregnant woman who had died, etc. It looks at figures like these, and I can understand why, and they are relevant to the story, but the way that they're put in there is kind of outside of the story. So we're getting the story and then suddenly we'll have this sideline of a story about a person who did this study into motherhood, and it's not really merged into the text. And to be honest, it's a clever idea, but I don't think this story needed it. I think because it is quite a short book, and I mean there's not a great deal of writing to a page, I felt like I would have been happier with this book had it done away with those sort of little researchy snippets and just had more of the story, because the story was really fascinating. As I say, it basically just looks at this woman's exploration into how her relationship was with her mother. She also touches briefly on her mother's relationship with her grandmother, and yeah, it's just looking at that in light of becoming a mother again herself. I would have thought actually that this possibly would have worked better if it was her first time as being a mother, because she already had a child. It kind of felt like these were all things that she would have considered already. But in general, I really liked it. I thought it was really well written. As I say, there was a slight downside with the researchy bits, and I did find myself switching off. But other than that, I was pleasantly surprised, and I don't really understand the negativity that I have heard around this book. So I gave it 4 stars. And then I read Louise O'Neill's The Surface Breaks. March was the Irish Readathon, so this was kind of my nod to that at the end of the month. This is Louise O'Neill's retelling of The Little Mermaid. Now, I don't get on with YA. It's no secret that I don't get on with YA. I'm quite open about that fact. There are very few YA authors who make an impact on me. However, Louise O'Neill is one of them. I've never actually read one of her books in physical copy, but I have listened to 2 of them on audio. Almost Love, I didn't love, but Asking for It was a really fantastic book, and I think it's a fantastic thing that that book is out there, and the subjects that discusses are really important for young people to be reading today. This was along the same lines. I think it is YA, it's written in quite a simplistic way, and I'm probably not the prime audience for it. However, I think it looks at some really important topics. It looks at so much in there to do with feminism, to do with sticking up for yourself among men, to do with body image, everything like that. And I think The Little Mermaid is a really interesting story to look at from that perspective, because I mean, let's be honest, in the Disney version, she literally loses her voice until a man falls in love with her and gives her her voice back. I mean, there are so many problems with that. However, I think this looks at that issue really well, and I think what's really lovely about this, without spoiling anything, is that it ends up being, obviously it is the story of The Little Mermaid, the story is still at the centre. However, it ends up being much more about female empowerment than it does about romance, which is so fantastic, and I would really recommend this. And then finally, I read my Shakespeare of the month, which was The Winter's Tale. Yes, I have to be honest, this is probably my least favourite Shakespeare that I have read so far. I think I'm starting to see that Shakespeare's plots are quite samey. I don't know whether that is because I'm just reading them one after the other, but yeah, I felt like this was kind of the same as a lot of the other Shakespeares I've already read, but not as good. It didn't really grip me. I thought the story was a bit just convoluted and not very gripping. Yeah. As I say, I'm not going to go overly into the plots or reviews of these Shakespeares because people know them already, but yeah, not my favourite. Moving onwards, I will hope to pick a better one next month. So that's everything I read this half of the month. Please let me know down below what you read, and I will see you next time. Bye!